Our mission is to prophesy again. This is a mission God has not only given to us, but to anyone who will give heed to his sure word of prophecy. It truly is a light shining in a dark place. This Key to Prophecy video will hopefully be one of many that will help you to realize how close we are to the second coming of Christ. May the day star arise in your hearts and illuminate your path to the kingdom of God. May he empower you to prophesy again.
So these are just my thoughts and what I discovered. So I'm just going to share what I discovered, and hopefully it'll be a blessing. God's throne sits on a foundation, and we know that that foundation is heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. So we know that just above the firmament somewhere, God's throne is somehow connected with the firmament. And we know that it's sitting on a solid foundation. In Revelation 17, when it says,
"And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication."
now we're going to focus a lot on these colors today. So take note of the colors that are mentioned there. Purple, scarlet, and gold. And she has a golden cup in her hand. And upon her forehead is a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. This woman is clothed in purple and scarlet, and she is decked with gold, and she has a golden cup in her hand. And her name is Babylon the Great, and she is the mother of harlots.
And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
And she is also identified in Revelation 18.
And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold and silver, and precious stones, and of pearls and fine linen, and purple and silk and scarlet, the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls.
Here we can clearly see that this great city Babylon is identified as the woman from Revelation 17. And if we compare them together on a table, it becomes very clear. We can see very clearly that Revelation 17 and Revelation 18 are talking about the same power. We've got purple here, purple, scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. So it uses the exact same words to describe it in both chapters. And then we see that her name is Babylon the Great, and it says in Revelation 18 verse 2 that Babylon the Great is fallen. In Revelation 17 she's called the woman, the great city, and here in Revelation 18 it's also referred to as that great city, Babylon, that mighty city, that great city. So this woman of Revelation 17 is the great city Babylon in Revelation chapter 18. And clearly Revelation 18 describes the punishment or judgment that's going to come upon this whore. But I want to focus upon the colours that the woman is identified with, these purple and gold and scarlet. Now, in Bible prophecy, a woman is a church, and a pure woman would be a pure church, and a harlot woman would be a harlot church. And she is arrayed and purple and scarlet and gold. And here is a picture which most of us would probably be familiar with. Anyone in the world would be able to identify that picture as coming from the Roman Catholic Church. We don't even need to say it's the Catholic Church because it's just so universally known by just looking at that picture that anyone would be able to identify it. So John specifically is describing this woman's very colours of her priests and the attire of her leaders. And she has a golden cup in her hand, just exactly what John says. All those years ago, nearly 2,000 years ago, he said that she would have this golden cup in hand, and it is amazing. God does not want us to be in any doubt as to who this power in Revelation 17 is. Here we see that she claims to have the prerogative and the power of God to forgive sins, and every priest is a mediator between God and man, when the Bible says that there is only one mediator, and that is Jesus. This is a blasphemous, counterfeit system of the real worship of the true God. But God also employs colours as well in his services, but he uses another colour that is distinctly absent and missing from the Catholic Church. The colour that the Catholic Church has missing from her worship services is the colour blue. Now, God uses the colour blue in his sanctuary service. The Catholic Church uses the same colours in their administration of their services, the same as God uses the purple and the red. And you can clearly see here that God uses blue where it's distinctly absent from the Catholic Church. And this is what God says.
Speak unto the children of Israel that they bring me an offering. Of every man that giveth it willingly with his heart ye shall take my offering. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them: gold and silver and brass and blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen and goat's hair. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. Moreover thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet. With cherubims of cunning work shalt thou make them. And thou shalt make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen of cunning work. With cherubims shall it be made. And thou shalt make an hanging for the door of the tent, of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. And for the gate of the court shall be an hanging of 20 cubits, of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. And their pillars shall be 4, and their sockets 4.
So we can clearly see there's a pattern here that is consistent of all the embroidery of the tabernacle and the coverings from which it was made are blue and purple and scarlet. And you can see that there's a lot of gold also represented in the sanctuary. The veil, the door coverings, all of the embroidery, they're all made of the same colours. Basically, all the embroidery that was in the sanctuary are made from those 3 colours. And now if we go and look at the colours that the high priest is wearing, we find the same thing. Here, God gives instructions about Aaron, the high priest's garments that he is to wear, and we find this.
And thou shalt make holy garments for Aaron thy brother, for glory and for beauty. And thou shalt speak unto all that are wise-hearted, whom I have filled with the spirit of wisdom, that they may make Aaron's garments to consecrate him, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate, and an ephod, and a robe, and a broidered coat, a mitre, and a girdle. And they shall make holy garments for Aaron thy brother and his sons, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And they shall take gold, and blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine linen. And they shall make the ephod of gold, of blue, and of purple, of scarlet, and fine twined linen, with cunning work. It shall have the 2 shoulder pieces thereof joined at the 2 edges thereof, and so it shall be joined together. And the curious girdle of the ephod which is upon it shall be of the same, according to the work thereof, even of gold, of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. And thou shalt make the breastplate of judgment with cunning work: After the work of the ephod thou shalt make it, of gold, of blue, and of purple, and of scarlet, and of fine twined linen shalt thou make it. And thou shalt make the robe of the ephod all of blue. And beneath upon the hem of it thou shalt make pomegranates of blue, and of purple, and of scarlet round about the hem thereof, and bells of gold between them round about. A golden bell and a pomegranate, a golden bell and a pomegranate upon the hem of the robe round about.
These golden pomegranates around the base of the hem of the high priest's robe, it was a combination of blue and purple and scarlet in between around the robes of the high priest. So these colors consistently come up all the time, consistently when it comes to the embroidery in the sanctuary, the curtains, and all of the materials that made up the curtain, and including the high priest's garments. They were all consisted of a consistent use of these colors. Now, the Roman Catholic Church is Satan's counterfeit of God's true religion. And he uses the same colors in their services except for the color blue. There is an exception, but it's not encouraged. But it's only for certain circumstances, and in Spanish countries where they worship and they have adoration of the Blessed Mary, they are allowed to wear the color blue. Outside of that, it's frowned upon and it is discouraged as inappropriate. So they don't like the color blue. Here's a picture of a priest wearing a blue covering. And I took this from A Catholic Life. And the question was asked, are priests allowed to wear blue vestments? And it says, yes, but only in rare situations. The blue chasuble may be worn by Spain and its dominions beyond the sea. It is a privilege originally given them by Pope Pius VII to the Church in Spain in 1817. And later it was reaffirmed by Pope Pius IX in 1864. In recognition of the centuries-old Hispanic defense of Mary's Immaculate Conception. So there must have been something that the popes were so taken by that they did in adorational honor of Mary that they allowed them to wear blue. It spread to other places formerly under the Spanish crown, as well as seen in the indult granted by Pope Pius X to the First Provincial Council of Manila for their use in the Philippine Islands. And then it says this, it says, no other nation is authorized to use it, and doing so constitutes a liturgical abuse. So they're very strong about not wanting to have blue as part of their system. I didn't know what the word indult meant, so I looked it up. And this is what it means. This is from a dictionary online. It says in the Roman Catholic Church, it means it's a license granted by the Pope authorizing an act that the common law of the Church does not sanction. So they do not sanction the use of the color blue, and it is only rarely given as an exemption. As an institution, they shy clear of the color blue. They don't really want to have anything to do with it. So why is this color blue so important to God and so blatantly and deliberately maligned by Satan's counterfeit? So what's so special about this color that God uses it everywhere in his sanctuary, and the Catholic Church is so detests it? Let's go to see what happened in Exodus with Moses and read in Exodus chapter 24.
And he said unto Moses, Come up unto the Lord, thou and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall near the Lord, but they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with him. Then went up Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. And there was under his feet as it were a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were the body of heaven in his clearness.
Have you ever wondered why the sky is blue? Well, that's because all the waters that are still above the firmament are still above the firmament, right? Well, maybe there might be another reason. Might not be just the water that's up there. There's something else up there as well. Notice how this translation of the verse puts this. I think this is from God's Word, I think it's called. It says, they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made out of sapphire, as clear and as blue as the sky itself. And here's another version. I think this is the literal translation version. I think that stands for. It says, and they saw the God of Israel, and under his feet was as the work of a pavement of sapphire, and the same as the essence of the heavens for clearness. Is the firmament made out of sapphire stone? I don't really know. I'm just putting the question out there. But the text says that Moses and Aaron and 70 elders saw God, and under his feet they saw something that looked like a pavement made out of sapphire stone. Now, I don't know whether it's real sapphire stone that they saw, but what they saw and they declared was that that's what it looked like. So we know that the firmament is firm, and according to what they witnessed, it seems like there's a very high possibility or plausibility that it's made of something that they described as sapphire stone. But we know that Isaiah tells us,
Thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool.
So God is just above the firmament, and his throne is there, and where his throne sits is just above the firmament. We know that God's feet are sitting there, and something which Moses said had the appearance of what looked like sapphire stone, as clear as the sky itself. And let's carry on with what Moses had to say about this. And it says in verse 11 of chapter 24,
And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he laid not his hand. Also they saw God, and did eat and drink. And the Lord said unto Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there. And I will give thee tables of stone, and a law and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them.
This is talking about the original tables of stone that God gave to Moses, the ones that he smashed when he came down from Mount Sinai when the children of Israel were worshipping the golden calf. It says that these tables of stone God provided for Moses himself. It says, I will give thee tables of stone. We often think that Moses might have cut them out of the mountain and took them up, and that God wrote upon them, but they were just part of the rock of Mount Sinai. But I found something very interesting from a Hebrew interlinear, which I thought was very interesting. It says here in this text, and he is saying, Yahweh to Moses, ascend to me at the mountainwood and be there, and I shall give to you tablets of the stone and the law and the instruction. So the text says that God himself provided the stones for the tables of the 10 Commandments. And notice what it says here. They were tablets of the stone. So what stone did God make these 10 Commandments out of? The stone would apply or mean that it comes from the previous stone that they saw that looked like sapphire stone under God's feet. Notice here, the tablets of the stone. If God gave Moses the 10 Commandments from the stone that he himself provided, then the stone that he provided can only come from the stone of the sapphire pavement that was under his throne. This would mean that the 10 Commandments were made from the same blue color sapphire, like the substance that was seen under God's throne by Moses and the 70 elders. This would mean that the 10 Commandments are from the literal foundation of God's throne. I wanted you to let that sink in for a moment. Here's a picture of what some people may think that they look like. Another way to look at this is that the color blue is the color upon which the foundation of the throne of God stands. And therefore the 10 commandments are as eternal as God's throne being taken from its very substance, from its very foundation. But is there any other evidence that the law of God and the color blue are connected? In Numbers chapter 15, we find this.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a riband of blue. And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them, and that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye used to go a-whoring, that ye may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy unto your God.
So what were they told to do? They were told to put a border, a fringe upon the borders of their garments, and that fringe was to have a riband or a thread of blue within that border. And when they would look upon it, it would remind them of the commandments of the Lord to do them, and to not go whoring, to go into harlotry. It was to keep them from becoming harlots against God. Now, the word fringe is quite an interesting word. It is a floral or wing-like projection, like a lock of hair, or a tassel, a fringe, or a lock, it's just like a thread. So the word fringe says it's like a wing-like projection or tassel on the borders of their garment that was to be blue, and it would remind them of God's commandments. This is what it might have looked like. This little tassel on the edge of their garment that was blue, to keep them from going into idolatry and harlotry, to keep them to remember God's commandments. Now, at the time of Jesus, the significance of what this command was had been largely lost sight of, and it became more of a status symbol. It was worn by many to magnify their own importance. Notice what Jesus says about this in Matthew chapter 23, verse 1.
Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries, and enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost rooms at feasts, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi.
Now, the color blue was supposed to be associated with the law of God, and the children of Israel were to place it around the borders of their garments so that it would remind them of the commandments. It was designed to keep them from fornication and idolatry. It was to keep them from playing the harlot. And I believe that because the color blue is the foundation of God's throne, and it's the foundation of his law, that this is the reason why the harlot woman of Revelation 17 is so antagonistic towards this color. Now, in looking at all of these things, I discovered that there is another color that Rome uses quite a lot, and that in their services, in their masses, and their what they do, and that is the color green. The priest wears this color when he does the normal mass. And here's a picture of an ordinary mass on an ordinary day, in a normal part of when there's nothing else special going on, just an ordinary weekday or Sunday. They will use the color green in their service of the mass. And this is taken from a Catholic website, He says here, in the Roman Rite of the Catholic Church, the colour green is frequently seen on Sundays and weekdays throughout the year. It is reserved for the season called ordinary time. So on any normal Sunday or day of the week, whenever a priest is doing his mass, you'll generally find that they'll be wearing a green cloak as a colour which they use. And I thought, well, what does this green mean? Why do they use green? What do they say? What does the Catholic Church say about the colour green and why they use it? And when I saw this, it blew me away. I really did. I read it and it didn't sink in, and I read it again, and it just, wow. This is what the Catholic Church believes about the colour green. There's the website it was taken from. It says green is in harmony with the very nature of the church. So this is entwined within the nature of the church itself. It says, she is a mighty tree which lifts its top majestically towards heaven, spreads its shady branches and leaves benediction over the earth, resplendent with the richest blossoms, bringing forth choice fruits of grace and virtue in abundance. Wow. This is the definition of the colour green by the Catholic Church. This straight away brought me to the story of Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 4 of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. So when you compare the two, it's just mind-boggling.
Thus were the visions of mine head in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew, and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it.
What does the Catholic Church say? She is a mighty tree which lifts its top majestically toward heaven and spreads its branches and leaves in benediction over the earth, resplendent with the richest blossoms, bringing forth the choicest fruits of grace and virtue in abundance. That's an amazing admission from the Catholic Church of the connections to Babylon. Straight out of the horse's mouth. Green is not a primary colour. It's a colour that is made by mixing blue with yellow. If blue represents the law of God and it's the foundation of his throne, what does it mean when the Catholic Church uses green, which is a mixture of blue and yellow? They are mixing God's law with yellow or gold. It means that God's law is tainted with gold. And there's a lot of gold in the Catholic Church, but the colour yellow could also, the golden colour of yellow could also represent the sun. And does the Catholic Church mix up God's law with the sun? It's just a question to put out there. I'm just putting it out there. Then just saying maybe there's a connection there. And particularly when she clearly declares herself to be Babylon just through wearing the colour green. It just blew me away. We're going to take a bit more of a look into the colour blue itself. Now, we have instances in the Bible where people were healed by just touching the hem of Jesus' garment. In Matthew 14, we had the story where Peter walked on water, and after that incident, they found themselves in Gennesaret. And we find this following account of what was said what happened at Gennesaret.
And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all that country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment, and as many as touched were made perfectly whole.
So I want you to think about that for a moment. All of the diseased and sick men and women and children of Gennesaret came to Jesus, and every one of them that just touched the hem of his garment was made perfectly whole. It doesn't say how many were healed, but it would have to be more than just one or two. It says all that came to him and touched his garment were made whole. So what's up with that? All the sick and dying residents were healed by just touching the hem of his garment. There's another more famous account of someone touching Jesus' garment and being healed. And that's the woman that had an issue of blood for 12 years. Now, there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye at first glance, and I'd want to dig a little bit deeper into this story. So let's take a look at it.
And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, If I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Jesus turned him about, and when he saw her, he said, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour.
And this is the way that Luke describes it in Luke chapter 8, verse 43.
And a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him, and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her issue of blood staunched. And Jesus said, Who touched me? When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, Master, the multitude throng thee and press thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me? And Jesus said, Somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And he said unto her, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace.
She had faith to believe that all she needed to do was to touch the borders of his garment to be healed. She had nothing to lose, right? But why was she so secretive? Why did she not come to Jesus openly and ask him? She came to Jesus in such a manner as to conceal herself so that nobody would notice who she was. It says in verse 47 that when she saw that she was not hid, she came trembling and fell down before him and declared what she had done. So why the secrecy? Why did she act in such a clandestine manner? It had something to do with the ceremonial laws that were the laws of the land in Israel. Notice what it says in Leviticus as part of the laws of the land of Israel.
And if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the even. And everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean, everything also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And whosoever toucheth anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And if it be on her bed, or on anything whereon she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean until the even. And if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and all the bed whereon he lieth shall be unclean. And if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, or if it run beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean. Every bed whereon she lieth all the days of her issue shall be unto her as the bed of her separation. And whatsoever she sitteth upon shall be unclean, as the uncleanness of her separation. And whosoever toucheth those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. But if she be cleansed of her issue, then she shall number to herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean.
So what was this woman's problem? What was her real problem? She had to deal with this ceremonial law, and this ceremonial law declared that she had been unclean for 12 years. I want you to think about that for a moment. It's something that would be hard to live with. This woman had an issue of blood for 12 years, and what I just read meant that she was considered by society as unclean, and everything she touched, everything anyone else touched that she had touched, was considered unclean. What do you think her life was like? Apart from the physical impairment of what she had to live with, she had been deemed unclean by this law for 12 years. I want you to think about that, what the implications of that would be for her to be considered unclean for that period of time. At least she didn't have leprosy, right? They were the living dead, literally. But was her situation really any better than theirs? I would consider that she would have been seen in just the same manner. Not only would she have been physically emaciated by the loss of so much blood, but to deal with these isolation laws. We ever heard that before? Sounds very familiar. Just navigating her daily existence would have been challenging beyond comprehension. She is not meant to touch anyone, not even her husband, if she had one, nor her children, or family, or friends. She could do no housework or even prepare family food. She had to be isolated because of her impurity all that time, and she was as good as being dead. She'd tried every option she knew of and spent everything that she had with no positive results. But then one day, she hears that Jesus is coming to town. I wonder what we would do if we heard that. Did you hear Jesus is coming to town? What would we do if we were there at that time? This was her last opportunity for hope. This was her last hope. If only I can touch his garment, I'll be made whole. Can you get a sense of her desperation? What was it about the hem of Jesus' garment that gave her so much confidence and so much hope and faith? If only I could touch his garment, I'll be healed. Remember that anything that she touches, no matter what it is, made it instantly unclean for 7 days. Sounds a bit like COVID. This would be a serious crime, just like it was a serious crime with all these COVID restrictions if you broke them. Man, but there's nothing compared to what she was dealing with. I guess if you were in her situation, how could breaking this law make her life any worse than it already was? She had nothing to lose. But what did she know that gave her such assurance of healing? Why did she have so much confidence that if I just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed? Listen to what Malachi has to say.
But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings.
Is this the sort of picture that we get when we read this verse? The bird with the sun flying in the sky with the sun in the picture. Maybe we tend to think that the wings have something to do with the Holy Spirit. There may be some connection there that we can connect to the Holy Spirit with these wings as part of seeing that as part of who Christ is himself, and that might be worth considering as a meaning of that. But I don't want to downplay that consideration, but I think there's more to this than that concept. But don't you think it's a little bit odd that it says the Son of Righteousness, obviously referring to the Messiah, is going to heal people with his wings? Jesus doesn't have wings. So what is Malachi talking about? What are these wings that he says is going to give healing? What is he saying? Let's look at what Malachi is saying in this verse. It says, but unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. That word wings is from Hebrew 3671. It means an edge or extremity. It can mean a bird or a wing, but it means a garment, a flap, a border, corner, or an end, or overspreading skirt, or the uttermost parts, or the edge or the extreme edge of a garment or a skirt, or the border of it. So the word can mean the wing of a bird, and that's the way that it's translated in this verse in the Bible that we have today. Every other part of this word means the border or the extreme edge of a garment, or the flap of a border, or the corner, or the utmost part of a skirt. So let's go back to Moses. It says in Numbers chapter 15, verse 38,
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations.
This word borders is exactly the same word that Malachi just used in Malachi chapter 4 that we just read. Here we see very clearly that Moses used it as borders of their garments, and Malachi, the way that we read it today, has it written as wings. Moses called it the borders of their garment, and that represented the law of God, or the foundation of God's throne. Malachi called it wings, and he prophesied 400 years before the Messiah came that there would be healing in these wings. But in the days of Christ, they read the Bible in Hebrew, and this would have been written in Hebrew with the same Hebrew word that Moses is translated as borders. She would have read it as borders of his garments. So this woman, if she read Malachi and she read that and she said the Messiah was going to come, the Son of Righteousness, and he's going to have healing in the borders of his garments. Why? Because the borders of the Messiah's garments would have a blue tassel or fringe, or a blue thread upon the extreme edge of his garment, which represented the law, and the law was a part of the foundation of the throne of God. This blue tassel that was on the edge of the Messiah's garments represented a direct connection with the foundation of the very throne of God. Today we just read it as healing in his wings. What does it mean? It doesn't really have the same significance. But this woman would have read it that way. It represented that the borders of Christ's garments represented the very throne of the eternal. When she was touching that, she was believing that she was touching the very throne of God. I believe that it was the word of God through the prophet Malachi that gave her such confidence to believe that if she could just touch that border of his garment, she would be healed. If we look at this picture of Jesus walking as he is walking, it looks like the flap of a wing that might be flapping out like that. The extreme edge, or the wing, or a wing of the extreme edge of his garment. But what does this mean for us today? God said to Moses,
And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it.
This includes the pattern for the high priest's garments, which are made of blue and purple and scarlet and gold. It is also safe to assume that Jesus, as our high priest, wears this same similar attire. The foundation of God's very own throne is manifested in the very garments that our high priest wears on our behalf. Red or scarlet represents the sacrifice of Christ's blood. Blue represents God's law as a permanent and indestructible as the throne of God himself. And purple is a blending of the two. God cannot destroy his law, but he can offer pardon through the sacrifice of his Son. Justice and mercy blended through Jesus, manifested in the very colors of the clothing that he wears. The Catholic Church has done away with the law of God, and that is why they have such an aversion to the color blue. They have literally taken away the foundation of God's throne by discarding and discouraging and disparaging the color blue. They are declaring that we don't want to have anything to do with the foundation of God's throne. There was a large crowd milling about Jesus that day, but evidence suggests that there was only one person that was healed among that great crowd that was pressing against Jesus on that day. Many people were touching him and milling about him and pressing about him, casually touching him as they were passing by or milling around him. But none of them were healed by that casual touch. It is not enough to just have a casual connection with Jesus. There are many today who look just like the multitude that were pressing about Jesus on that day. They have a casual connection with Jesus. That woman knew that her existence was nothing without the healing power of Jesus. Her existence was worse than being dead. She knew how hopeless her situation was. Nothing and nobody could help her but Jesus. He was her only help, her only hope. The problem today is that most people don't realize that they are the living dead and how hopeless and dire a condition they are in. Are we like the multitude that not realizing our real need, but we are casually connecting, passing by Jesus? There are very few who really know their desperate need of him and are closely connected to him by living faith. If we want to be healed from the ravages of sin, all we have to do is to reach out and touch the hem of his garment, because it has the absolute assurance of the very foundation of God's throne itself.